So I'm Brian Sheedy. I'm a senior principal tech. It's an education consultant for education services. Been around for a very long time, 15 years straight with nothing but Altiris, Symantec, well, basically endpoint management. And I'm here to show you the deeper dive than you've seen in the introduction. So we're going to go through a lot of the really, the low-level stuff, if anything. All right, so it's both for ITMS 8.5 and GSS. Okay, so we'll start by going through the core platform enhancements, look at the product integrations that we've done in a little more depth, as well as the solution enhancements and Go Solution Suite enhancements that have happened. All right, so we're gonna divide this into 2 hours. So there's 1 hour for the first 2 parts, 1 hour for the next 2. All right, so let's start with the obvious. Now, as you probably know, a lot of these things are in the release notes, right? But who wants to read all that? Right? So I I spent well over 100 hours going through all of the resource guides, all of the reference notes, talking to dev, PM, and so on, and I basically took the top 100 that we've done in the release here. So we have additional support now for the SMP and for the SQL Server for the following platforms. So we're looking at Windows Server 2016. I'm sure you're all very happy about that because you've moved along. So everything can be ported on that for the notification server, as well as the SQL Server on 2014 SP2 and 2016 SP1 and SP2. Okay, so you can start upgrading those components now if you need to. We also have additional site server support for Windows 10, so all the Redstones right up to 5, as well as Windows Server 2016. Okay, so you can start updating those also. And agent support, too many to name, right? So we're looking at all of the flavors of Windows 10 Redstone right across the board for the agent supportability. Mac OS, so 10.3, 10.4 with their pretty names. I should also mention that it's also 64-bit support now, whereas it wasn't in the last release. Red Hat, CentOS, as well as SUSE and Ubuntu. And there are some notes on 18.04 right now. There's partial note on how to 12.7014 that you can check out. It'll show you some of the limitations. They're very small things. You still have a lot of the major functionality. All right, so that's the OSs. And of course, don't forget, we've had this how-to for years and years. This is your platform OS support matrix. So this will give you a lot more detail beyond what I've shown you in this slide. Okay, so let's go into the Symantec Installation Manager. So we know this is the thing that installs our stuff. Okay, so one of the big things we've done is we've added the ability to switch application or the application identity within the Installation Manager. So in the past, let's say, who's actually had to do that? Change their application identity, right? Is it fun? Right? All right, it's gonna be fun now. So what we've done is we've added a new configure NS settings within the SIM, and there's a few things you need to know about it. Again, it's just accessible from the SIM going into the configure notification server settings, and that takes you into all the proper things you'd have to change. Okay, so you have to know that the account must differ from the original, right? So once you've got that established and you've put the account name in, it will add it automatically to the Symantec administrator role. So that's all done for you in the background. Okay, the default owner will immediately change to this new account. So if it was, Alt SVC before, it will change to Alt SVC1, let's say. Okay, so it'll change to this new account immediately. Okay, we also note in SIM that we have our release updates updating a lot faster. So if you've done any RUs from 1 to 3 to 4 to 5, you've noticed there's a certain speed that it takes, or a certain amount of time it takes. That has been significantly increased. So you can actually get them done a lot faster. Okay, you won't notice that until RU1, of course. Okay, so it also shows install products from all of the defined product listings. So if you looked at the listings before, you might have not seen every single solution down the line. They did a little rework on the XML behind that to ensure that you see all the parts that go to all the products, suites, solutions, etc. Okay. All right, so you can manage the products that belong to a specific product listing. So you'll see that in the menus themselves. And it's also no longer, basically this one confused me a little, but what it's basically saying is you can't apply licenses that are in the future. So if I have a bunch of licenses in my hand and they're for December 1st, 2018, it's basically going to say don't apply till later. In the past, you used to be able to apply any license and it would put it in there, but you wouldn't see it immediately. So it's a little less confusing. Okay, there's not much to change about this. It's been running since 7.0 and it's been doing its job. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the agent. So the Symantec Management Agent, we now have 64-bit Mac management. So we have an agent that's 64-bit written right through, because Apple basically said nobody shall develop applications that are 32-bit anymore. You must do it. So it was very easy for us to transfer that over to 64-bit. And in testing, we had very little impact, if anything, on getting up to 64-bit. Okay, it's probably because it's Mac, right? All right, so we could also apply communication profiles by command line now. So you don't have to go into the console itself and check the boxes and move the policies and targets. If you need to, en masse, you can use the AXNS agent.exe and use the switch import profile with its path. And as you know, you can export the profiles into XML files, use this switch to get them in, and also if you have them password protected, because it is a pretty secure file you don't want to play around with, this allows you to enter the password as well as the XML file. So you can send a batch right out there, send a secured XML file, and send it out there, and everybody will have their profiles. Okay, that's also really good in the case of updating and upgrading. So if you're doing each and every client and you want to just get the profile out, you might find a faster way of doing it before it upgrades to the latest agent. Okay, so this is a new one. So in your targeted agent policy, I'm sure there's a lot of users of deployment solution, not deployment server, but deployment solution, where you have to do a couple of tricky things to ensure that it gets an initial policy, if you're looking at 8.0 or 8.1. And this allows you to kick it off and say, get the agent, update your membership, do a basic inventory, and so on. Well, it's not just in the console. You have to do certain things. So in this release, we have an initial settings policy in the targeted agent policy that actually is right at the top, and it gives its initial setting. And that setting is pretty basic stuff, right? Just saying how often to talk back, what are the power settings, what are some of the health settings. But it's that one initial one that it gets so that it can go on and do other things. Okay, so in this case, it's disabled by default. So if you are a deployment solution user, or you just want any new computer to come up and get a policy without applying to whether it's a desktop or a server, a site server, and meeting those policies, you can turn this on and it will always get an initial policy. Okay, so it sets the initial configuration for the registered agents. It immediately connects to task servers. So whatever's in this configuration, it will at least have a task server to talk to. It's also great to enforce a configuration before you do any type of administration to the machine. Okay, so this applies the standard targeted agent setting as soon as it gets it, and it registers itself. So it first gets the initial setting, and then if it applies to all desktops or all mobile or all site servers, it gets the proper policy and it continues on its way. Okay, so this must be enabled for deployment solutions. So if you are a deployment solution 8.1 user and you update, this is the one policy you do want to turn on so that all your new computers that come in instantly get a policy, and they could be delivered. They could be delivered software. They could get certain patches and things like that. Okay, all right. So that's a great one, and we're looking at now persistent connection. So persistent connection, as you well know, our agent is it's basically, it initiates the communication, right? So the agent's on my computer, it talks to the notification server, gets its policies, it does its things, but it's not a live connection, right? It always needs something, whether it's a task or a policy, to kick off an event or a job. So in this case, 8.5 has persistent connection. This enables that real-time communication between the agents, notification servers, package servers. Okay, how does it do it? We're using WebSockets. So it uses the WebSocket communication protocol, and it operates over HTTPS using the port that we use for agent. So in your case, if you're an HTTPS solution, you would actually not have to open a new port. You wouldn't have to do any more rules to them. And it uses the existing SSL certificates. So we know right now you got 2 or 3 certificates, whether it's agent or server or the NS itself. This doesn't use any more. So you don't have to manage another set of certificates. Okay, and it supports all the settings you see in the communication profiles. So everything from proxy settings to the notification server to talk to, everything that's in that communication profile will work across the WebSockets or persistent connection. Okay, so all of our infrastructure supports it. So all of the internet gateways, the task servers, the Windows, Linux, and Mac agents all support persistent connection. And if it's enabled on the client, so again, it's just the setting you can see here, right? So if it's enabled for those clients, all the LAN or WAN traffic is used. It uses persistent connection to go to all notification servers and task servers. Okay, if it's enabled for the notification server and the site servers, then it basically talks with the persistent connection between the notification server and its package servers, task servers and so on. But what it's transmitting is things like NSEs over it, policies, tasks, etc. Okay, so it's not used for package downloads. So if you're very familiar with the way we do package downloads, it's not the same type of connection. It's policy-based. It's basically file transfer. Okay. All right, so if you turn off persistent connection, whether it's an agent, a task server, notification server, it just reverts back to its standard mode, which, as you know, is either HTTP, UNC, or HTTPS connection. So basically standard agent communication. Okay? And you'll see later why persistent connection is very important. It's critical to time critical management and so on. So how does it look? Well, first of all, you have to have HTTPS in your organization, right, to use it. Okay. It gets enabled in the NS settings. So if you look at the notification server settings in your settings console, you'll see a little green button that you could turn on. So this turns on the communication from the notification server to the other components. That's the first place. Okay, so it's also enabled in the agents and the site servers within the console. So their configuration. So if we look at the communication profiles, you'll see a little button there. It's persistent connection is enabled. You press the edit button and you can turn on different aspects of the persistent connection. Okay, it's also in the site server communication settings. So if you go into your site servers, a specific one, let's say Win22 site server, you go into that configuration, it will have a button to turn that on too. Okay, so it can be done at any level. You can say, just do persistent connection between my notification server and my infrastructure, like site servers and package servers, or you could tell it to just go from notification server to agents, or everything, right? It depends on what you need. If you don't have an application to use things like time critical management for, let's say, your infrastructure, then you would just turn it off. Okay. Okay, another feature, we turned on a new policy called cleanup task schedules. So how many have millions of tasks in their schedules that just don't do anything, right? So what this one does is it goes in and it disables or deletes any tasks that have no occurrence in the future. So they're orphan tasks, right? So it goes through and it removes them from the Windows task scheduler. And it does it on a regular basis. You can schedule it. And this is where you find it. Now, it's really more of a maintenance mode, if anything, or it's a maintenance job to ensure that you don't have extraneous amounts of data in your database. And when you're running things like task reports, you'll see hundreds of thousands of these little lines in there where you just want to see what actually ran, right? Okay, so this is just a cleanup task. Console notifications, so we did rework this option. So what you'll find now is when you see, as an administrator, the product listing. So if there's an update available, you might have noticed that some of the items that come up in this notification sometimes override each other or overlap. Well, we've reworked that to allow you to see what the warning is, separate out what the updates might be or any of the notifications. And it can also be controlled per console user. So depending on your groups and how you've set your security, you can set certain things to display or not display. Okay, I told you it was deep dive, right? Right down to every little button. Okay, then we have the task instance name. So this one's really neat. I've seen this one since version 7, I believe, where you take the task and you notice that it's just named for whatever it is, right? So the instance name was based on the task name. So if I told it to reboot a computer, I'd have 1,000 tasks called reboot computer. And you go, well, which one was it? How do I report this? Okay, so in the past, that's what we've had to do. It's difficult to distinguish in the console. Okay, so what we've done now is we are allowed to specify the task description, and in 2 places. Okay, so when you see the quick run on the bottom there, you'll notice an extra white box on the top. And here I could say, my reboot of the computer 22. I could type any kind of character. I'm sure it's probably a 256 character limit, but at least you could put something in front of it. Okay? It's also available in the new schedule. Okay, so if you look at the settings for the new schedule, there's a line there that says task input parameters, which is the same box basically. So I can say pilot group 2 task. I can define it. Okay, it's these little tiny things that do make a huge difference, especially if you're managing hundreds and hundreds of tasks. Okay, so it's easily searchable now. So if you use parameters, prefixes, suffixes, certain keywords, now you can search, as you know, you can search tasks now. Makes it a lot easier. Okay, now in jobs and tasks, there's a few changes. Okay, so currently, let's just say in 8.1 or before, when we've created a job or task and we wanted to basically make a break in it. So I'm going through, I got 5 items that are running. If I wanted to ensure that it stops because something failed, I might have to put something in there, a script or some kind of thing or a conditional that says if error 2, then stop. But natively in the console, I didn't have the ability to say at task 52, stop it if anything goes wrong. I'd have to do some kind of programming. Okay, so now what we have are these new inputs for each task. So every single level of your job, at the task level, I can now say, fail it if something happens. Okay, so not just at the top level. Okay, so this controls any part of the job, and when it executes or if it fails, it will stop the entire job, report it back better, because if you had to put some conditionals in there, you just would have had a stop. Now I could actually write a little more to it. Okay, so we can now define every single task as a critical task if we need to. Okay, so it saves time and provides proper visibility. You'll see when you double click on a failure, you'll actually get the reported event. Okay, a few changes in power tasks. So currently, if you have software installations, you might see them fail when there's a reboot pending, right? So I've just got it, let's say I did a really tiny update to Notepad++ or something. I send it out to all my engineers, and basically 1 out of 20 fails. Why did it fail? It's sitting in reboot or pending reboot for a patch, let's say. So that fails, it doesn't try it again. So what we've done now is we've brought in a new reboot option, and you'll see this under the power command task that says restart computer only if pending reboot. Okay, so what this does is in certain cases like these, if you check the box, in situations like in-use file name, right? So you've seen those in-use file names where it's saying I can't do anything because I have to have a rename operation. Computer rename, so if you do a computer rename, that kind of stops the Windows OS especially. Computer role changes or additions, as well as Windows updates. So if Windows updates in that mode where it's like, I just did it automatic and I have to reboot, our software may not go through. So what this one will do is in those cases, it'll allow it to proceed and it won't fail it. So upon reboot, it continues its job, right? Before, stops dead. After, now it will actually run through. So this will increase the success of your software distribution. Okay, so custom task success and failure codes. So this is for the scripting. So think about a run script. You never had the ability, other than programmatically, to actually stop something because of a certain error code, or say it's a failure, or say it's a success. Okay, so in this release now, we can either say any error code is a success, okay, or I can do multiple values. So I can do 1082, 1602, 1699, whatever I need to do. Now it's only valid for run scripts. Okay, so that's been added. Okay, how many people use hierarchy? I'll just skip them, okay. Well, in hierarchy, we have legacy AD management. So right now in hierarchy, you can't import AD data and then replicate it down to the child notification servers, okay? It's mandatory that the parent takes in the Active Directory. Okay, so if AD import happened on the child NS, you couldn't manage things like imported filters and groups on the parent. Okay, so there was a little disconnect between them. This caused mismatched GUIDs. So if you do have a large environment and computer 22 is GUID this and computer 22 is GUID this on the parent and child, that caused a lot of problems. Now, if you multiply that by, let's say, 120,000 endpoints, it makes a huge merge process that just basically slows down the notification servers. Okay, so in this release, we have a replication option that was added to the AD import. Okay, so the rule is called AD import replication. Right, so this replicates data or users and computers that are imported from Active Directory. Okay, it's disabled by default, but it gives you a few more options. It's a little more granular. So you're able to do things like just do normal replication, which means users and computers just do it as you normally do it. Replicate only the data classes or only the new resources that are different between the two. So it's a little more granular. It gives you more options in handling Active Directory users and computers in a hierarchy situation. Okay, so continuing with the Symantec Management Platform, we have a new thing called the Data Class Summary Generator. Now, how many of you have created your own summaries, right? Oh, well, Symantec guy, yeah, Mr. Jim. Of course you have. Okay, so Data Class Summary Generator, basically what we have is if you look in the console, there's a lot of summaries. Your resource manager is a bunch of summaries, right? If you look at the inventory summary or the software distribution summary, that's inside. So what this allows you to do is take smaller subsets of much larger data classes and create your own. Let's say you're doing some kind of a replication between a reporting server and your notification server. You can say, all I really want is these 4 fields out of the 50 that are in AX AC information, right? And I just want the specific ones. So what you can do is you can create a new data summary, okay? And what it'll do is it'll aggregate all of this stuff based on your source and populate it with a new one. I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, it's also good for replicating across notification servers if you don't want to use hierarchy. So it's a little hard to see here, but basically what we've got is a schedule saying every day at 12 o'clock, I want you to go into either a query that I developed or a report that exists. And I want you to pull that data as my data source. And then what I want you to do is create this, basically this data class summary that represents all the fields that I have or that I told you, right? So it could be my, I don't know, let's say my computer platform summary, right? It gives you all the different vendors, okay? And it'll create one of these. And this summary can not only be used for replicating data between different notification servers, which is the primary function, but it can also be used for things like reports, right? So you can use the report, or sorry, the query that came out of it, or the summary, as a report. You can just call that instead of writing your SQL and so on and so forth. So anywhere you would use a query or an actual summary, you could use this here. Other applications might be for data connector, right? So if you have a data source that is your summary you custom made, think of it kind of like as a view. You're making your own views, but you're doing it the legal way. We don't want you to create views in the SQL database because we don't support them. This is another method to actually allow you to create supportable summaries, queries, views, etc. Okay? So it's just another way of taking massive amounts of data into a small summary for use for other things, right? Instead of you running a massive query to get field here, there, and everywhere. Okay? I believe there is. It would probably be very simple to find on support.symantec.com too. Just look up data class summary generator, or of course on the help. So it's a little more of an advanced concept, but okay. All right, resource target modification. So if you need to modify a target, I see smiles around here. Okay, here's a big one. So you're inside of let's say a software delivery policy, right? A managed software delivery policy. And you go in there and you go, I really want to use this target, but I need to add that one computer. Well, what are you going to do, right? You're going to get the warning, it's used by other policies. Don't touch it, it's danger, right? So what you got to do is to change the target, you got to go into the target window, find the target in the computer view, go and save the target as something else after you added that one person, and then reapply it, which means go back into the policy, go into your target, change your target to the 1+1. Well, that's solved now. So what we've done here is we have added resource target cloning. So yes, you can clone a target right in the computer view. You just go right click, clone, and everything's done. Well, you're not there right now. You're inside of the software policy that your boss is telling you to get out tomorrow. Okay? So what we've got now is we still have the is used by another target. That warning still appears, telling you that it's part of another one. And we have a clone button. It's a simple little checkbox that says clone. So at that moment, you can go into the text beside it and say +1 or whatever you want to call it, right? Change the name itself. Changing the name effectively makes it another target. Don't change the name, you just kind of screwed up the target, right? So it still has things, of course, defined by security roles, so you still have that feature. But the big one here is that it clones the target at the spot that you're working in, not going through 4 steps to change it. Okay, so if you do not have the rights to change the target, you'll see a lock icon right there. And then you go to your administrator and say, give me the rights, I need to change my target. But it does prevent those who don't have the rights to change it from changing it. Okay. Is that a good one? Oh, I see happy faces. Okay. All right. Who's happy about this one? So, SNMP v3 support. Okay, so this is obviously within our network discovery components. Okay, so this supports, there's support on all Cisco gear, switches and devices and the switches and devices that are connected to them. So it's Cisco related. You check on the v3, enter your parameters, right? Community string, whatever it might be. Okay, so it will discover items beyond it using v3 support. Okay, so again, it's used for discovering devices using the network discovery protocol. Okay, and it'll gather agentless inventory of anything connected to the Cisco device. Okay, and that's the key right here, is make sure you know it is for Cisco devices. Okay, so we're not forcing you to do this one. We're just saying, it's kind of like your mom or your dad saying, put your coat on, put your boots on. We have a schedule for SQL defragmentation. Okay, so this is, we've noticed obviously it is the biggest impact to any of your environments. Okay, so having a fragmented database is a huge impact. So what we've done in here is we've enabled the SQL defragmentation process within the console. Okay, so one of the things you should realize too, if you already have things like maintenance plans and so on SQL, you would want to come in here and disable it. What is the harm? Well, the chances of 2 going at the exact same time running a defragmentation process would be unlikely, but you can never have too much, right? Okay, so it's just one of these things that, we're doing a nice thing for you, right? Trying to keep your database nice and, clean. Okay, so this, for me, in my 15 years, this is my happiest moment. I know it's kind of geeky, but the core settings page. So what is this thing? So this is a new page. This replaces, well, the nsconfigurator.exe is still there, right? We have stuff from 5.5 still in that directory, but this is the nicer way of doing it, right? So it's not a 32-bit, it's right in the console. This is the core settings. Okay, so what can you do in here? You have all your items listed on the left. Obviously they're searchable and so on. Okay, they're easily edited. So you basically go to them, double click on them or press the pencil, and you go in there and change your parameters. So it's basically the web version of nsconfigurator. Now we still do warn you, obviously, don't play around in here unless you've read an article or you've been told to do so by support and the other disclaimers, right? Because the difference between a 1 and a 0 on some of these settings is whether your NS works or it doesn't, right? Okay, so we also have a folder above the core settings called active settings. So this shows you all of the ones that are active at the moment. So instead of you having to search right through each one of them. Okay, we also have a core settings audit report. So in this case, this shows all the changes. So you have that one know-it-all administrator. I remember being one of those. I didn't change that setting. I didn't increase the queue thresholds. I didn't turn off the whatever service. Well, this is your audit report right here. This is telling you exactly what happened, what it was changed from, right? So it has the from to to changes. It went from 1 to 1,000, right, for processes or something like that. It shows the user and the time it was changed. And you can edit the setting at that time. So if the know-it-all went in, change the setting, you can just double click on it and basically change it back to what it should have been. Okay? Okay, so we're going to move on to task and package server infrastructure. So these are the changes in our standard site infrastructure. So we have a few new site-based reports. We have a subnet to site assignments report. So this shows you all the subnets and the sites to which they're assigned, right? It seems pretty simple, but it's not exposed, or it wasn't before. Before, you'd literally have to go into site management and dig around in there to see what was assigned. So this is right in our reports tab. We have subnets with affiliated sites by computer. So it's nicely organized, so you see those two in the same report. And it drills down into the view computers on the subnet. We also have the packages distribution by download type. So this one here, I didn't have a lot of data to show, but you can imagine what it's about. So it's basically saying, how did it get that file, right? So here's my package. How did it get that file to the site server? Was it P2P? Was it multicast? Was it HTTPS? Was it UNC? So it gives you a little more information. It's a great one to test whether P2P is doing what it's supposed to do between things like the notification server and your package servers. Okay. And this one, of course, does drill down to the exact source for package download. So that, again, like I mentioned, HTTP, UNC, P2P, etc. Okay, so we have a few more P2P options. So if you've worked with the peer-to-peer in 8.1, we've actually enhanced that to include a couple of new features. So we replaced the maximum bandwidth option that you see in 8.1 with 2, right? So in this case, I can set the maximum upload and the maximum download. So I can make a kind of a variant or a difference. Okay, so I can do independent throttling settings for each one. And the blockouts in this case are respected too. So if you've got those turned on, this will respect it. Okay, we also now have the ability to not use peer-to-peer. We can set a criteria to say, well, in the old version, you basically had it on or off, right? So now I can say, in these specific situations, I would like you to not use P2P. So, hey, oh, sorry, Mike, take a bow. All right, so in this case, we're looking at, like I say, disabling in certain cases. Okay, so the first one is when a package server is available on the same subnet. So I'm in this room, the package server's down there, it's on the same subnet. It goes, no, I don't need a P2P because my package server is literally in the other room, right? When cloud-enabled management mode is enabled, so if you are a remote worker, you're out in the Salesforce and you're at the Starbucks, do you want P2P to be working at that point, right? If you're in internet mode or you're at home, Do you want that 2 gig update from Microsoft? Okay, we also have the ability to distinguish Wi-Fi. So when I'm on a Wi-Fi network, right, not particularly through internal means, whether it's our corporate or not, I can disable the P2P when I'm on any Wi-Fi network. And you can do any combination here too, obviously, right? Turn them all on or any combination of the 3. Okay, so now we've got that granularity of when to use P2P or not. Okay, we improved the usability of the P2P reports. So the 8.1 release was obviously the first one saying, here's P2P, this is what's working, these are the reports telling you that certain things are happening. So what we did is we added a few things. So there's a packages distribution by download type. So this is basically showing it all of the packages, the download type, P2P, HTTP, standard, right? It drills down into the downloads by computers and download types, which drills into the computers and TCP info, which is just basically saying it's that machine if you have to go that far. Okay, very simple reports, but they're very useful if you're trying to understand what your P2P is doing and all other methods. All right, so we have peer-to-peer in 8.1. It works great. It does its job. It improves the speed at which updates and other things get down there. But let's look at some of the existing limitations in, let's say, 8.1. They're challenges, they're not problems, right? And this is the same across the board, no matter what you use out there in the industry. So in the cases of network instability, so the connection's up and down, you're at home, your internet goes up and down, and you're trying to get certain packages delivered through P2P, the computers are elected as the peer master, right, in certain groups or locations, and they start downloading the same package again. So the internet's up, they're downloading, the master's getting it, everything's great. Goes down. Well, what does it do? When it comes up again, it starts downloading that same package from the beginning again. So that's a little inefficient. But when your network's working, peer-to-peer is great because it's got that ability to do so. When there's a minor change in the package, so you've just developed a new MST file for the MSI you're sending whatever out there for, there's a tiny change to it. If it detects it in midstream, it's getting the file to the master, it goes, oh, wait a minute, something changed about it. I have to download it again, right? So that's another case. And then you have late corruption. So for some, you might be, let's say, delivering data in a software package, right? It could be all this legal data or whatever it might be, a 2 gig PDF file or something. That's being sent down the line. And right at about 1.999 gigs, it detects that there's corruption. What does it have to do? All the way back again and download the thing, right? So P2P is great if you don't have these issues. Okay, so to offset that, to eliminate that problem, we've come up with file and block level downloading, this feature in P2P. So how does it work? Okay, so we have a notification server or a package server, and the package is up on that device. We have an endpoint, endpoint 1, it's the peer master. Okay, so it's going to wait for the file. And we have another one that's a peer client, right? So we got a master and a client. So how does file and block work? Basically, what it does is it divides the package on the notification server or package server into 2 megabyte blocks. Now that's configurable, so you can make it as big as you want or as small as you want. Depends on your needs. And it divides it out. So what it does is it sends down the first block to the master. The master receives that block, the 2 meg block, and it does blockchain hash validation. Big word for, let's do a CRC check. Let's do a hash check to make sure that that 2 meg block is exactly what it should be. So if it approves, if it passes, it says, okay, write the block, right? As soon as it writes that block, the master sends the block to the peer, okay? And that peer goes through, okay, I'm gonna validate it, check the hash, and it says it's okay. And the process continues. 2 megs, okay, okay, 2 megs, okay, okay, you get the point, right? So it goes through 2 megs at a time. Okay, so there's a lot of checking behind the scenes. So it gets it immediately, or it sends it immediately. Okay, so how does this translate to our network issues, right? So for network instability, links up and down, we're basically downloading the blocks and sharing them immediately. So there is no interruption. I got my 510 blocks out of 1,000. I'm just going to continue at 511 and continue on. Okay? If you have a minor change in the package content, it transfers only the changed blocks. Okay, so just the 1 bits or the 2 megabyte blocks, 20 megabyte, whatever you set it for. Okay, and if there's late corruption, it gets to 1.99999 gigs and it has a problem, well, it only requests the blocks that are corrupted, right, and resends them. So that's a huge improvement, and it prevents a lot of these things, which are pretty typical in an environment, and ensures that your package gets to the location, runs, and effectively, patch management, software delivery, etc., be much more reliable. Okay, so you can read about that too. It is in the release notes. Okay, cloud-enabled management. So we'll look at some of the enhancements there. All right, the agent installation package. So this is definitely a feature that's been requested by clients, simply because right now you make a cloud-enabled management installation package and you can choose one organizational group, that's it, right? So what we've done is we've given you the ability to select multiple organizational groups. So this is applicable, let's say even in staging scenarios, where you get the agent and you want it to have a specific communication profile. I can say add 5 or 6 different groups to it, and each one of them would have a different communication profile to it. So what happens is you'll create the package, you will tell it which groups you want to be part of this package, okay? And when they run it, they'll be asked, the user will be asked, which group do you want to select, okay? So it could be, let's say you set them up for accounting and sales and so on and so forth to have different profiles. This would pop up and say, which group do you belong to? Accounting, sales, etc. And it will give you the proper communication profile. Okay, we have a brand new certificate management page, so it's definitely enhanced. So it looks something like this. You'll see it right in the console under, let's see here, under notification server, the base notification server folder where the notification server settings are. Okay, and it shows you each and every certificate that's used within the environment, its status and so on. So it combines some of the existing report items that we had before, as well as some new stuff. So in here we can do renewal of the SEM agent certificates, right? We could also revoke them. We can replace the root certificate if we need to. So a great example would be, we're using self-signed right now, but we want to go to PKI or some other certificate method. I can change them here and have them filter out to the proper components. And also for website certificates and so on. Okay, it also has wizards to guide you through what you're supposed to do. So if you're going to revoke it, it'll come up, or if you're going to replace a certificate, it'll say, oh, by the way, just so you know, before you continue down the line, you're going to need a PFX file and so on and so forth, right? Now, it doesn't replace your knowledge of certificates and security and so on, but it will at least guide you to do the right thing. Because if you know about replacing certificates along the line, you do it wrong, everybody is wrong, right? Okay, so you can easily see and fix issues. There's all sorts of little icons, little triangles, warning signs, exclamation marks, as well as green check boxes and so on to help you out. Okay, so inside of that report, there's also a certificate status report. Okay, this shows the list of all the agents with or without certificates. So you can really pinpoint them and say, well, I know I gave it a communication profile for this group of machines, but they're not getting them, right? So it's down there on the bottom, and that opens up this report, computers having or without a certificate. Okay, or it's actually in the reports pane if you need to get to it under the agent reports. Okay, so this one here is showing you the name, the domain, the OS name, the machine GUID, the server that it belongs to, amongst other things, whether it's installed or not. Okay, so this is good for pinpointing issues with certificates. And another thing you'll notice is in the agent UI, so going into the Symantec Management Agent, in the past 8.1 and below, we had all of our certificate information in the registry. So it's under HKey local machines, software, Altiris, communications, certificates. So everything was pretty much in there. Of course, you know, all of the key parts were thumbprinted and encrypted and so on, but the fact was we used the registry as a database. Okay, so in this release, we now have the ability, if you turn on the diagnostics, to show a certificates tab. So this is like the report I showed previously, but at the agent level. So you can actually see it. It has a lot of information. It's extended the information we had in the past. Before we could say, oh, this is a server certificate and it's got this information, just a few different attributes. This has really expanded it past that. Okay. So in the UI page, when you enable the diagnostics, it shows it. And the types of properties you're seeing here are, well, it says right here, obviously friendly name, the store, the usage, the source it came from, the thumbprint, self-signed or not, right? Whether it's when it was installed, when it is expiring, issued to, issued by. So a lot of information that you would get if you had to go into the Windows MMC and double click on it and get the properties. So this doesn't just show our certificates, it shows anything to do with the agent itself. Okay, so we're also using friendly suffixes and prefixes to show you what type of certificate it is. So CA, right, certificate authority, you got SEM, Cloud Enabled Management Certificate, NS, and things like that, right? It'll tell you exactly what type of certificate it is. Okay, so we can get additional details of what it's used for, not just the prefix of it, but there is a column that says usage. And it says this is the one that does blah, right? This is the one that does your client authorization or your server authentication. Okay, you're also able to right click on any one of the certificates there and look at the properties without again going outside into the Windows MMC and so on. Okay, we can also get details, copy details if we need them for other reporting or actions. So in this case, I'm just copying the details into a text file. I can get the thumbprint, the serial number. Okay, and the only thing to remember is this is not a live view. You have to refresh it every once in a while. Okay, so that's a great add-on there. Okay, anybody use multiple languages in the console? Excellent. Hopefully you're happy about this one. So you can change the console language in the browser itself. It overrides the browser language. So if you're currently in US English right now, you can come in here and go session, which is on our top console if you remember, session override browser language. Okay, so change it to whichever one you have. The key thing to remember too is you must have the language packs installed. If you don't, obviously it's not going to change to anything. Okay. Okay, we also have improved the console search. And if you know you put a generic term in the search, you're going to get pages and pages of reports and components and policies and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work done on this to make it a lot more useful. So the first thing is it will tell you an estimate of when it's going to be finished. So 53, 56, 58%, it'll scroll down. Okay, so you put your word in, it uses percentage to show you. Okay, it will show you divided results like you've seen in the last release, but it also has added a whole bunch of information. So if you are really good at creating reports with a good description, that description will be in each one of the search items. Okay, so you get additional information. Okay, we can also get rid of irrelevant search items. Like if you don't want to see packages with that name, or you don't want to see certain reports with that name, you can turn off some of the actual dividers. Okay, that will stay that way, and it's per user too. So if you do this, you're not changing it for anybody else. But if you want to reset it back to default, there's a little tiny yellow button at the top that opens up all the columns again. Okay, so significant changes there. Okay, any questions on the SMP or any of the stuff I've shown so far?
No, even though you and I sat together when we did the EAP, there are a lot of things that you're showing here that, you know, we kind of fumbled around with at that time. We're like, what's this? Oh, that does this and that does that. So I'm really excited. And as I'm looking at this, I'm like, man, I got to catch up with Brian as soon as this is over with and see if he's going to do
I'm gonna
another
be busy
book
when I
or
get
something
back.
like that. You know, see what's going on. So, no, it's a lot of things, and I want to actually get more information on it
Right.
versus what we're doing here, which is kind of like the highlights. But these are some really, really powerful settings that we have now in the 8.5 that we haven't had in the past.
Right. And they could be the smallest thing, the smallest button or whatever it might be. Now, the good news is, at the end, for the low, low price of $5, I have this video that I did for, I'll show you the link to where what we call the ITMS 8.5 differences course is. It's actually up on the public e-library right now, and it's much longer than this, and it gets into even more detail. And you get to hear my happy voice for an hour and a half. All right, so it is available, and it also has a document too. Okay, sorry, way over there. Question.
So regarding real-time persistent connection, is it agent initiated or is it NS initiated? I ask because we have certain rules with our firewalls, and kind of want to make sure that the clients actually do report in
Right.
fairly regularly.
So the easy way to answer that is if it's communicating on 443 right now with the agent communication, whatever you did to make that happen, the persistent works on that same level, correct? And not only that, it's basically, if it's using the port 443, it's the protocol that goes through. If you have something that can block a specific type of protocol, like, you know, if it's blocking WebSockets type communication, then that's a different story. Anybody want to elaborate on that? On our side? Yeah. This is the TCM man.
Hey, Rob Barker. I'm one of the product managers here. I work for Mr. Covey. I'll be talking a little bit more about this in the next session here, but in a nutshell, the persistent connection is essentially a policy. Once the agent checks in for the first time, if it actually is assigned that policy via the communication profile, it will immediately start that docking process. And once it's docked at that point. But as Brian mentioned, it is still over an SSL connection there. So from a firewall perspective, you will run into zero issues. I mean, unless you're doing some very, very scary, packet inspection, you won't have any problems there at all.
Thanks. One more question, I guess, is regarding the detection for the peer downloading. You mentioned detection by Wi-Fi. Does it affect the detection if it's running VPN at the same time? Like, say, it's running is VPN over Wi-Fi.
I don't know if it's distinguishing that myself. So basically, you're on Wi-Fi. Yep.
Question again?
So if you're on a VPN and a Wi-Fi connection, and you turned on the do not do peer-to-peer for Wi-Fi connected devices, would it detect that it's on Wi-Fi or a VPN?
Yeah, so it detects the network adapter that the connection is going live through, and if it's on Wi-Fi, it'll shut down peer-to-peer. If you have that setting enabled through targeted agent setting, obviously.
And as we know, when it goes into VPN, it's its own adapter, is it not, in most cases? So it would not detect it as a Wi-Fi, right? So you might have just added another use case in this case too, right? Where you don't want it to happen if you have both on, a VPN and off of Wi-Fi. But that should be the behavior of that. Does that help? Yep. Sorry.
I'm coming to you. 1 sec.
Come on, Andy.
I was just wondering how that works on a metered connection. So if you're obviously hooked
Yeah.
up to your phone on 3G or 4G, you might want to shut down a package download.
Right. Metered
Another feature
connection.
request.
3G, 4G, and especially how Windows 10 detects it as a metered connection, right? I don't know offhand. That would probably be a different use case also.
No, so that is something that's come up in conversation, the metered connection. We've looked into, there are a few other use cases that we've actually identified that would, perhaps be able to take advantage of that metered connection flag, if you will. But currently, it's not something we've implemented just yet, but it is on the radar, if you will.
Okay.
Two questions.
Sorry. There.
Sorry. First, related to the persistent connection. If all of my task servers are not HTTPS currently, but some of them are, if I turn that functionality on, will it behave normally on the ones that connect to task servers that are not HTTPS, or do I have to have them all connected to HTTPS?
Yeah, it'll fail over to standard connection, If it's not HTTPS, it won't even pursue the persistent connection at all.
Okay. And then second is really not a question, but a feature enhancement. You added the, do not use peer-to-peer when it's on the same subnet. I'd like to see if it's not on the same site, because our subnets, our server subnets are always different than our client subnets. So, and I know for a fact, because I've tried it on 8.1 RU6, that it's specifically to the subnet, not the actual site. So there could be
Okay.
one in that room, but it's a different subnet.
That
guys
is
get
correct.
that
So
one?
peer-to-peer right now, the way that it's built is actually respects the actual subnet. So if you think about why we built it that way, and you look at a highly distributed retail organization, for example, and you have a retail office, 1,000, 2,000 retail offices out there. I mean, typically you have a site with potentially 10, 15, 20, maybe 50 machines. So we built it at a subnet level to avoid any potential catastrophe, so to speak. So if you look at the way you configure it, you have TCP and UDP, right? UDP on the same port number is used strictly for the broadcast range, basically saying, I'm here, I'm going to detect all of the subnet, all of the devices that are on the subnets. And by default, by the nature of the broadcast command, it's not supposed to cross any thresholds, so any routers or firewalls, so that you don't have machines from a slow site transferring over and connecting to another slow site to download package. So that's the whole reason for that. So we limited it at the subnet level. If you look at targeted agent setting in its basic configuration, you could create different targeted agent settings, but that can get a little crazy depending on the size of how many locations you want to do that and duplicate that configuration with. And if you look at its configuration, you can say, okay, I'm going to define a site and I'm going to apply targeted agent settings for a location that has potentially 5, 6, 7 different subnets. And if you look at that config, it allows you to add additional subnets to configure. And you can list all the subnets that you want to basically create a massive hive, so to speak, or a DHT network that crosses boundaries. But by default, it's not supposed to. So it's not at a site level unless you target them directly. With that said, there is an actual feature request we entered recently on our systems to allow for that type of functionality, to allow you to define the site level. So site respect not only the subnet, but if the machine is known to be as part of a site, then respect the site. But that's features, right? That's enhancements to the solution. So for now, the only way for you to do that is to create a separate target agent settings, add the additional subnets to discover, and you can do it that way.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Time check.
We're about right there. Lunchtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you can bear with me for 5 minutes, or do you want to just go straight to lunch?
I don't. Are they gonna attack you if you go for 5 minutes?
Well, I'm peaceful. I'm Canadian. You won't hurt me. Won't hurt my feelings. Okay, I'll just go through some of the integrations. We did already see a lot of this in the initial presentation, and Rob is actually going through all of these in detail. So all the SEP integrations and so on. So I'll just glance over those so we can stay on time for the solution integrations and so on, solution enhancements. But I know you've probably seen this one in past presentations. This is our Control Compliance Suite integration. This is the closed loop. So basically how it works is we're automating remediation and compliance, looking for irregularities in the system that are detected on the network. Okay, so this works with CCS, ITMS or EPM software, as well as a service application like ServiceNow. Okay, so this integrates all these together. And I'm just going to jump right to how does it do it. Well, there's a doc 9752 if you need to learn about it. So basically in CCS, you set yourself up a check, look for a certain patch or whatever it might be. You run a compliance scan on CCS, okay, and you trigger it to auto log tickets in ServiceNow, right? So ServiceNow will go through, create a ticket, and it'll go through its normal process, who it gets assigned to, change the status, so on and so forth, okay? And once it's set in ready for remediation, then ITMS is always watching ServiceNow. It's saying, okay, any new tickets in ready for remediation, it sees that and it remediates. So whatever it was related to, a certain vulnerability or a patch, ITMS will go out and remediate it. Once it's done, it will update the ServiceNow ticket, basically close it, and through its own scans in CCS, it will scan again and find out that that endpoint was resolved, right? It's a very quick way of showing you the integration. Obviously, behind the scenes, you just got to set up your servers, the CCS server, the ServiceNow, and the configuration within. So that's the first one. We also have Control Compliance Suite VM integration. So in this case, you've already seen this one where it basically takes the endpoint, looks for vulnerabilities, okay, and it's for Windows clients. So CCS Vulnerability Manager, this is another part of CCS. It goes through and it provides the end-to-end scanning of vulnerabilities in the environment. And it basically spits out what's high, medium, low, or info. So just think of those as a status. Patch Management Solution is connected to the CCS VM server, and it takes this data in. Okay, so it remediates them based on whether it's high, medium, low, or info, and you enable these yourself. And the new feature is Automated Vulnerability Remediation, which takes all that data together once everything's connected, and if you enable the high policy, let's say, it will automatically remediate anything that CCS VM said was a high vulnerability. So it's automatic. It's kind of like 0-day if you turn on the policies, right? So Rob will go through that today in the next session. SEP health information, we had it in 8.1. We added a few attributes. This is the list of all of the things we're gathering now. Okay. So you need to have the inventory plugin. Obviously, it has to be on your machines. And you have to make sure in any of your inventory policies you turned on SEP agent, the checkbox within the parameters of inventory. So once you do that, what do you get? A lot of this stuff is familiar to you. You saw agent health and so on in the past, SEP agent health especially. But now you've got a lot more detail. So all those attributes we're gathering from the SEP agent. The SEP agent will be displayed in the computer details, like right at the computer level, or at the computer summary side of things. So you've got all the health. So this is all the SEP agent health stuff, right? This is the actual information from the, whether it's the virus definition, what agent version, so you can run reports based on that. Also the common one, which is healthy or needs attention. So it'll go red, obviously, if there's a problem. On the summary side of things, you have a bar chart that shows you things that aren't that are untracked, which means they're not reporting SEP data or they're not on SEP agent. Which ones are good? Which ones need attention? They're all clickable. They change the targets on the side, right? The list of computers, just like all the other views. Right? Nice pie graph to do the same. And we can go straight to the SEP agent health settings right from the console. So as an administrator, you press that little button there, and it takes you right into the settings. So there's a couple of overrides that you can do. You can say, show it as healthy regardless of whether it has an antivirus or not. Like you can override certain things from affecting your reports. These are all clonable. You can make additional ones, one for Mac, one for Windows computers, ones in Toronto, whatever it might be, to react differently with their targets. Okay, and obviously you can turn them on and off, right? Track it or not. Okay, another change, we also have a new task, which we were talking about, do you still have SEPIC out there? Well, we're past SEPIC now, right? If you use the SEP integration component in the past, we're building all the tools that we can into the console instead of having some other connector. So in this case here, this task will basically restart the agent if it stopped and tell you whether it's already started or it isn't. So it's an individual task that can be used in any of your jobs, right? It's accessible in the computer summary flipbook. You'll see this little tiny play button. So if it's red, you can press the button, and all of those in that report in the red, it'll send a task out to start the SEP agent if it stopped. Okay, and also in the individual computer details flipbook, there's also a little green button down at the bottom. If it's not running, you can press it and turn it on from there. Obviously, if the computer's off, it's not going to turn it on, but okay, so that's a new one. Agent install and upgrade. So back in the day, we used to have it in SEPIC where we could bring in the SEP installation file and distribute it. So this is now part of the console. So now we can take any of the SEP installs, whether it's a 32-bit, the Windows one, and so on and so forth, bring it into the console and just import it. So I have my 32-bit one ready to go for all Windows computers. I import that file in. Okay, it pulls all the metadata out of that file, puts it into a policy, okay, with all of the versions and everything else. It automatically puts it into the software library as a deliverable piece of software. Okay, it appears in the console so I could pick them and run them anytime I want. And it also creates the whole policy for me. This is really meant, I know a lot of you are very experienced with delivering software and so on, but imagine if you're a SEP customer who's not familiar with our console and they just started using it. This sets up all their SEP targets and their policies and everything so they can easily take it from SEP and use us as the delivery mechanism. Okay, but it's also real easy for you guys because you already know how to do this. Okay, so basically what it does, what you do is you select the agent policy entry itself, let's say the 32-bit. You adjust your target to whoever you want to deliver it to. You enable the policy just like a managed software delivery policy, and off it goes, and it installs the SEP agent. Okay. Okay, so what's really great about it is it features, it allows us to deliver SEP agents all around because SEP itself doesn't do it. Allows us to use P2P and checkpoint recovery to get it out faster and report back the saturation of the agent, let's say, or the success of the delivery. Okay, and you know our infrastructure is pretty scalable, so if you wanted to blast out a 32-bit agent out to 10,000 people, it would be done. And there's a lot of reports to tell you the success and so on. So you can now deliver the SEP agents out there, or upgrade too. That's the other most important thing. Quarantine, Rob's going to go through today. We've already seen it, I think, twice. But basically, once you configure it, it goes out and does an assessment scan based on on your settings here in the policy. You pick your CVEs, like Damon was saying. You pick your targets, do your exclusions, and you do your grace period. It goes out and scans for it. Anybody that does not meet that criteria, it basically reports back to the SEP manager server and says, quarantine computer 22. And then it quarantines it off the network. So Rob's going to go into this in a lot of detail, and that's it for part 1. Great.
To learn more, visit go.symantec.com/manage.